Commander Vrethkale stood on the bridge of the Void Sovereign and looked at the external camera feed. He looked at the hull. He looked at the portside armor plating. He looked at the section between frames 47 and 53. He looked at the space where the hull plating should have been. And the hull plating was not there. It was not damaged. It was not breached. It was not scarred by weapons fire or corroded by age or compromised by structural failure. It was simply not there. Removed. Cleanly. Precisely. As if someone had unscrewed it, lifted it away, and carried it somewhere else. And beyond the missing panel, visible in the cold vacuum of high orbit, was a small human maintenance drone, hovering patiently, holding a hydrospanner, waiting for the next panel to become available. Vreth stared at the drone. The drone stared back in the way that machines stare, which is to say it did not stare at all but simply occupied the space where staring would have occurred if it had been alive. And Vreth, commander of the Krell Dominion's most classified warship, the vessel that had terrorized the Cooperative for 40 years, the ship that no sensor had ever detected, the phantom that no fleet had ever caught, realized three things simultaneously. First, he was visible. Second, he had been visible for 11 days. Third, the humans had been taking his ship apart, one panel at a time, and they had never fired a single shot. The Void Sovereign was not a ship in the conventional sense. It was not a vessel designed for transport or exploration or trade. It was a weapon, a singular, purpose-built, unmatched instrument of strategic dominance. It was 4 kilometers long. It was 1 kilometer wide. It carried enough firepower to glass a continent. It carried enough shielding to withstand a planetary defense grid at full output. It carried enough stealth technology to render it invisible to every sensor array, every detection system, every scanning protocol that the Cooperative had developed in 300 years of technological advancement. The stealth was the key. The Void Sovereign did not hide. It did not cloak. It did not jam or scramble or deceive. It simply did not exist as far as sensors were concerned. The ship's hull was coated in a metamaterial that absorbed and redirected all forms of electromagnetic radiation. Its engines produced no thermal signature. Its mass was distributed through a gravitational dampening field that negated its presence in gravitational scans. Its communications were routed through quantum-entangled channels that left no trace in subspace. The ship was, by every measurable metric, absent. It was a hole in the data, a gap in the record, a place where the universe should have registered something and registered nothing instead. For 40 years, the Void Sovereign had operated with impunity. It appeared without warning over contested systems. It delivered devastating strikes against military installations, shipping lanes, and resource depots. It vanished before retaliation could be organized. It struck 12 systems in its first decade, 18 in its second, 23 in its third. By the fourth decade, the Cooperative had stopped trying to predict its movements. They had stopped deploying counterfleets. They had stopped issuing alerts. They had accepted the Void Sovereign as a fact of galactic life, a weather pattern, a natural disaster, a thing that happened and could not be prevented and could only be endured. The Krell Dominion did not claim ownership of the ship. Not officially, not publicly, not in any document or statement or diplomatic communication. The ship was, according to the Dominion's official position, a myth, a rumor, a fabrication propagated by weaker species to justify their military failures. The Dominion denied the ship's existence with the same conviction that it employed the ship's firepower. And the denial was effective because the ship could not be detected, because the ship could not be tracked, because the ship could not be photographed or scanned or recorded in any way that would constitute evidence. The ship was invisible, and invisible things cannot be proven, and unproven things cannot be condemned, and uncondemned things cannot be stopped. The Cooperative knew. Of course the Cooperative knew. Every intelligence agency in every member species knew. The ship was Krell. The ship was real. The ship was responsible for 40 years of destruction. But knowing and proving were different things. And the Cooperative had not found a way to bridge the gap. Not in 40 years. Not with 300 years of sensor technology. Not with the combined resources of 37 species. Not with the most advanced detection systems ever built. Not until Yuki Tanaka stopped looking for the ship. The Counter-Phantom Task Force had been established 18 months ago. It was the cooperative's 7th attempt to address the Void Sovereign problem. Previous attempts had focused on detection, on building better sensors, on developing new scanning protocols, on creating technologies that could see what existing technologies could not. The approach had always been additive. Build something new, add something to the existing framework, enhance the capability to detect, increase the resolution, expand the spectrum, fill the gap with more data, more information, more signal. The 7th attempt was different, not because it had a better plan, because it had run out of better plans. 6 previous task forces had failed. 6 previous approaches had produced nothing. The 7th was a last resort, a Hail Mary, a collection of people who had nothing left to lose and therefore nothing to protect. The task force was small, 12 analysts, 4 engineers, 2 strategists, 1 coordinator, 19 people total. They worked from a cramped office on level 14 of the cooperative station at L4. They had limited funding, limited access, limited authority. They had the thing that the previous 6 task forces had not had, the willingness to fail openly, the willingness to try something that might not work, the willingness to look stupid in pursuit of something that might be true. The 12 analysts were drawn from 9 species: Vantek, Greethi, Circe, Kethrin, Sarthi, Tessic, Urin, Drathi, and human. 1 human, Yuki Tanaka, 24 years old, junior analyst, assigned to the task force not because she was exceptional but because she was available, because the human delegation had been asked to contribute a representative and had sent the person who was least occupied, the person who had no other assignments, the person who was, in the bureaucratic language of personnel management, unallocated. Yuki did not mind being unallocated. Yuki preferred it. Unallocated meant quiet. Unallocated meant no one was watching. Unallocated meant she could work the way she worked, which was slowly, carefully, and in a direction that no one had thought to look. She had been unallocated for most of her career. She had been unallocated at the university. She had been unallocated at her first posting. She had been unallocated at her second. She had been unallocated because she did not fit the categories that allocation required. She was not fast enough for the tactical divisions. She was not loud enough for the diplomatic corps. She was not specialized enough for the research institutes. She was a generalist in a galaxy of specialists, a pattern recognizer in a galaxy of data processors, a person who looked at problems from angles that other people did not know existed. She had been unallocated for 3 years when the Counter-Phantom Task Force was formed. She had been assigned because she was available. She had accepted because she was curious. She had begun working because she had nothing else to do. And she had found the Void Sovereign in 11 days because she was the only person on the task force who had stopped looking for it. Yuki Tanaka had grown up on a fishing boat. Not a metaphorical fishing boat. An actual fishing boat, small and wooden, operating out of a harbor town on Earth's northern coast. Her family had fished for 4 generations. They had fished in fog. They had fished in storms. They had fished in the dark. They had fished in conditions where visibility was 0 and the sea was indistinguishable from the sky, and the only way to find the fish was to understand where the fish were not. Her grandfather had taught her the principle. He had taught her when she was 7, standing on the deck of the boat in the gray pre-dawn, watching him work the nets. "You cannot see the fish," he had said. His voice was low, steady, the voice of a man who had spent his life reading water. "So you do not look for the fish. You look for the not fish. You look for the space where the fish should be but are not. You look for the disturbance, the absence, the place where the water moves differently because something is displacing it. You do not find the thing. You find the shape of the thing by looking at everything that is not the thing." She had not understood at 7. She had understood at 10, when she had watched him navigate through fog using only the sound of waves against rocks, identifying the safe channel by the places where the sound was not. She had understood at 13 when she had watched him locate a school of mackerel by watching the birds that were not diving, because the birds dove where the fish were deep and circled where the fish were near the surface, and the circling was the absence of diving, and the absence was the information. She had understood at 16 when she had navigated the boat home through a storm by watching the waves that were not breaking, because the waves that broke were shallow and the waves that did not break were deep, and the deep was the path, and the path was defined by what was missing. She had carried the principle to the university. She had carried it to her first posting. She had carried it to her second. She had carried it to the counterphantom task force. She had carried the principle of absence, the principle of negative space, the principle of finding the thing by mapping everything that was not the thing, the principle of looking for the shape of the fish by looking at the water, the principle of finding the channel by listening to the silence, the principle of finding the path by watching the waves that did not break. She had carried it to the task force, and she had applied it to the void sovereign, and she had found the ship, not by looking for it, by looking for where it was not. The task force had been working for 16 days when Yuki requested access to the cooperative's gravitational survey database. Not the current surveys, the historical ones, the surveys taken over the last 40 years, the surveys that had been taken in the systems where the void sovereign had struck, the surveys that had been taken before the strikes, during the strikes, and after the strikes, the surveys that no one had thought to compare because the ship was invisible to gravitational sensors and therefore irrelevant to gravitational data. Yuki did not believe the ship was irrelevant to gravitational data. Yuki believed that the ship's gravitational dampening field, which negated its mass signature, did not negate its displacement. The ship had volume. The ship occupied space. The ship pushed against the fabric of spacetime by existing within it. The dampening field could hide the mass, could not hide the displacement. It could not hide the fact that 4 kilometers of hull were occupying a region of space that should have been empty, could not hide the shadow, the negative space, the absence. She pulled the data, 40 years of gravitational surveys, thousands of data points, millions of measurements. She did not look for anomalies. She did not look for spikes or deviations or irregularities. She looked for the opposite. She looked for the places where the data was too clean, too smooth, too perfect. She looked for the places where the gravitational field was exactly what it should be, with no variation, no fluctuation, no noise. She looked for the places where the universe was too quiet, because the universe was never that quiet, because the universe always had noise, always had variation, always had fluctuation. And the places where the noise was missing were the places where something was suppressing it, where something was occupying the space and smoothing the data and hiding in the perfection. She found 3 such locations in the first hour. She found 7 more in the second hour. She found 11 in the third hour. She mapped them. She overlaid them with the strike records. She overlaid them with the fleet movement logs. She overlaid them with the communication intercepts. She overlaid them with the shipping lane disruptions. She overlaid them with everything. And the map resolved. The negative spaces aligned. The absences connected. The shadows formed a shape. The shape was a ship. The shape was 4 kilometers long and 1 kilometer wide. The shape was the void sovereign. And the shape was currently parked in high orbit above the human colony of Cedar Ridge. Yuki stared at the map. She stared at the negative space above Cedar Ridge. She stared at the absence that was the ship. She stared at the thing that had been there, according to the gravitational data, for 11 days. She stared at the thing that no one had seen. She stared at the thing that no one had detected. She stared at the thing that had been sitting above a human colony for 11 days, invisible, undetectable, present. She picked up the comm she called the coordinator. She said, "I found it." She said, "It's above Cedar Ridge." She said, "It's been there for 11 days." She said, "And I think the drones are already working." The coordinator stared at her. The coordinator did not ask which drones. The coordinator did not ask how she knew. The coordinator did not ask for confirmation. The coordinator looked at the map. The coordinator looked at the absence. The coordinator looked at the shape. The coordinator picked up the comm. The coordinator called Cedar Ridge. And Cedar Ridge, which had been quietly, patiently, methodically dismantling the Void Sovereign for 11 days using maintenance drones and hydrospanners and the kind of slow, steady, unhurried work that humans did when they were fixing something instead of fighting it, answered the comm and said, "Yes, we've been removing the hull plating. We're on panel 47. Should we continue?" The coordinator said, "Continue." The dismantling had begun on day 1. Not with weapons, not with force, not with aggression, with observation, with patience, with the particular, methodical attention of a species that had spent 200,000 years solving problems by understanding them before acting on them. The colony's defense coordinator, a former engineer named Ruth Okafor, had noticed the gravitational anomaly on the first day, not because she was looking for it, because she was checking the colony's water pump calibration, which required gravitational baseline measurements, and the baseline was wrong. Not dramatically wrong. Not alarmingly wrong. Wrong by 0.003%. The kind of wrong that most instruments would not register. The kind of wrong that most people would not notice. The kind of wrong that Ruth noticed because she had spent 20 years calibrating sensitive equipment and had learned that the small wrongs were the important wrongs. The wrongs that meant something was there that should not be. The wrongs that meant absence. The wrongs that meant shadow. Ruth had reported the anomaly. The colony's small security team had assessed it. The assessment had concluded that the anomaly was consistent with a large object in high orbit. The assessment had concluded that the object was not emitting any detectable signal. The assessment had concluded that the object was, by every standard detection metric, not there. The assessment had concluded that the object was the Void Sovereign. And the colony had decided not to fight, not to flee, not to call for help, not to panic, not to do any of the things that the cooperative expected colonies to do when confronted with the Phantom. The colony had decided to fix the problem, the way humans fixed problems, slowly, carefully, methodically, without drama, without violence, without the need to be seen doing it. Ruth had deployed the maintenance drones, 12 of them, small, quiet, designed for hull repair and structural inspection. Not weapons, tools. She had sent them up in pairs at 6-hour intervals to avoid detection patterns. She had programmed them to approach the gravitational anomaly from vectors that would not intersect the ship's expected sensor coverage. She had programmed them to attach to the hull, to identify panel seams, to locate fastening mechanisms, to begin removal. The drones had worked for 11 days, 6 hours on, 6 hours off, 2 panels per cycle, 22 panels removed, 47 panels remaining. The drones had removed hull plating with the patience of a mechanic disassembling an engine, with the precision of a surgeon extracting a splinter, with the quiet certainty of a person who knows that the work will be done, and that the doing is the thing and that the thing is enough. The Void Sovereign had not noticed. The ship's sensors were designed to detect threats, weapons fire, energy signatures, fleet movements, communication signals. The maintenance drones were none of these things. The maintenance drones were small, quiet, slow, non-threatening. They were the kind of thing that the ship's threat assessment system was designed to ignore. The kind of thing that did not register. The kind of thing that was not there. The kind of thing that was, in the ship's perception, absent. And the absent was the invisible. And the invisible was the safe. And the safe was the thing that was taking the ship apart. The crew had not noticed. The crew had been monitoring the colony's communications. The crew had been tracking the colony's shipping movements. The crew had been preparing for the strike. The crew had been doing the things that the crew had done 40 times before. The crew had been looking outward, looking for threats, looking for responses, looking for the things that the cooperative always did when the Void Sovereign appeared. The fleet mobilizations, the alerts, the evacuations, the panic. The crew had been looking for the panic. And the panic had not come. And the absence of panic had been interpreted as paralysis, as fear, as the frozen silence of a colony that knew it was going to die and had stopped moving. The crew had been wrong. The silence was not paralysis. The silence was work. The silence was the sound of 12 maintenance drones removing hull plating one panel at a time. The silence was the sound of a colony fixing a problem. The silence was the sound of humans doing the thing they did best. Not fighting, not fleeing, not panicking, fixing, slowly, carefully, methodically, without drama, without violence, without the need to be seen. And on day 11, Commander Vrethkale checked the external cameras. And Commander Vrethkale saw the drone. And Commander Vrethkale saw the missing panel. And Commander Vrethkale understood. Vreth stood on the bridge. He stared at the drone. He stared at the missing panel. He stared at the space where the hull plating should have been. He stared at the hydrospanner. He stared at the thing that was taking his ship apart. He stared at the thing that had been taking his ship apart for 11 days. He stared at the thing that he had not noticed. He stared at the thing that his sensors had not detected. He stared at the thing that his crew had not reported. He stared at the thing that was the absence, the shadow, the negative space, the thing that was not there. Status, he said. His voice was flat, controlled. The voice of a man who has just discovered that his reality has been revised and is trying very hard to find the edges of the new reality. The tactical officer, a Krell named Dren, pulled up the hull integrity report. His hands were shaking. His voice was tight. 22 panels removed. Port side, frames 30 through 53. Ventral plating, frames 40 through 60. Starboard secondary armor, frames 15 through 28. The structural integrity is compromised in 4 sections. The shield harmonics are destabilized in 2 regions. The hull is no longer stealth-coated in the affected areas. The ship is visible, partially, increasingly. Vreth stared at the report. He stared at the numbers. He stared at the locations. He stared at the extent. He stared at the thing that had been happening while he was preparing for the strike. He stared at the thing that had been happening while he was monitoring the colony. He stared at the thing that had been happening while he was doing the thing he had done 40 times before. He stared at the thing that had never happened before. Who? He said. His voice was quieter now, tighter. The voice of a man asking a question he does not want answered. Who is doing this? Dren pulled up the drone identification. Small, quiet, non-military, maintenance class, colonial registry, Cedar Ridge. The colony, Dren said. His voice was very quiet now, very tight. The voice of a man delivering a truth he does not believe. The colony is doing this. The humans. They are dismantling the ship. With maintenance drones. With hydrospanners. With tools. They are not fighting us. They are repairing us. They are removing us. They are taking us apart the way you would take apart a broken machine. Slowly, carefully, without urgency, without anger, without the need to destroy. They are simply removing. And we did not notice. And we did not detect. And we did not respond. And they have been doing it for 11 days. Vreth stared at Dren. He stared at the tactical officer. He stared at the shaking hands. He stared at the tight voice. He stared at the truth. He stared at the thing that was happening. He stared at the thing that had happened. He stared at the thing that was going to happen. He walked to the communications console. He opened a channel. Not to the fleet. Not to the Dominion. Not to the cooperative. To Cedar Ridge. To the colony. To the humans. To the people who were taking his ship apart with maintenance drones and hydrospanners and the kind of slow, steady, unhurried work that humans did when they were fixing something instead of fighting it. The channel connected. A face appeared. Female. Middle-aged. Dark-skinned. Calm. Wearing a work uniform stained with grease. Wearing the expression of a person who had been expecting this call. Who had been waiting for this call. Who had been preparing for this call. Who had been dismantling a 4-kilometer warship for 11 days and had known, at some point, that the call would come. "This is Ruth Okafor," the woman said. Her voice was quiet, steady. The voice of a person reporting a completed task. The voice of a person who has been doing a job and is now, finally, being asked about it. Colony Defense Coordinator. Cedar Ridge. How can I help you? Vreth stared at her. He stared at the calm face. He stared at the grease-stained uniform. He stared at the voice that was not afraid. He stared at the voice that was not triumphant. He stared at the voice that was not angry. He stared at the voice that was simply, quietly, absolutely certain. The voice of a person who had done a thing and was now waiting to see if the thing was enough. You are dismantling my ship, Vreth said. His voice was flat, controlled. The voice of a man stating a fact he does not understand. Yes, Ruth said. Her voice was quiet, calm. The voice of a person confirming a fact. We started 11 days ago. We are on panel 47. We estimate 43 more panels to complete the portside removal. The ventral section is approximately 60% complete. The starboard secondary armor is approximately 30% complete. We project full structural compromise within 6 days if we maintain the current pace. Vreth stared at her. He stared at the numbers. He stared at the projections. He stared at the calm. He stared at the certainty. He stared at the thing that was happening. He stared at the thing that had happened. He stared at the thing that was going to happen. He stared at the thing that was the end of the Void Sovereign, the end of the Phantom, the end of the 40 years, the end of the thing that could not be seen, the end of the thing that could not be caught, the end of the thing that could not be stopped, the end of the thing that was now, visibly, undeniably, being taken apart by a human colony with maintenance drones and hydrospanners and the kind of patience that only humans possessed. Why? Vreth said. His voice was quieter now, tighter. The voice of a man who has been defeated and is trying to understand the defeat. Why did you not attack? Why did you not call for help? Why did you not flee? Why did you do this? Ruth looked at him. She looked at the Krell commander. She looked at the face that was asking. She looked at the face that did not understand. She looked at the face that was asking the question that every species in the cooperative had been asking for 40 years. The question of why the humans did not fight. Why the humans did not flee. Why the humans did not panic. Why the humans did not do the thing that everyone else did. Why the humans did the thing that no one else did. Why the humans fixed. Because attacking would have revealed that we knew you were here, Ruth said. Her voice was quiet, calm. The voice of a person explaining something simple. And if we revealed that we knew you were here, you would have left. And if you left, we would not have been able to remove you. And if we did not remove you, you would have come back. And if you came back, we would have had to remove you again. And the removing is the thing. And the thing is enough. And the enough is everything. So we did not attack. We did not call for help. We did not flee. We removed. Slowly, carefully, methodically, without drama, without violence, without the need to be seen. We fixed the problem. The way we fix all problems. The way humans fix all problems. Slowly, carefully, methodically, until the problem is no longer a problem. Until the problem is gone. Until the problem is the thing that was removed. Until the removal is the thing. And the thing is enough. And the enough is everything. Vreth stared at her. He stared at the calm face. He stared at the grease-stained uniform. He stared at the voice that was certain. He stared at the words. He stared at the meaning. He stared at the thing that had been said. He stared at the thing that had never been said before. He stared at the thing that was the human. He stared at the thing that was the fixing. He stared at the thing that was the removing. He stared at the thing that was the enough. He stared at the thing that was the everything. And Vrethkale, commander of the Krell Dominion's most classified warship, the vessel that had terrorized the cooperative for 40 years, the ship that no sensor had ever detected, the phantom that no fleet had ever caught, stood on the bridge of his dismantling vessel and made a decision. Not to fight, not to flee, not to retaliate, not to call for reinforcements, not to do any of the things that the Dominion expected commanders to do when their ship was being taken apart. He stood down. He ordered the crew to stand down. He ordered the weapons to power down. He ordered the engines to shut down. He ordered the shields to deactivate. He ordered the ship to be still. He ordered the ship to be quiet. He ordered the ship to be the thing that was being removed. He ordered the ship to be the thing that was being fixed. He ordered the ship to be the thing that was enough. And the void sovereign, the phantom, the invisible, the undetectable, the unstoppable, the 40-year terror, the thing that could not be seen, the thing that could not be caught, the thing that could not be stopped, sat in high orbit above Cedar Ridge and was removed. Panel by panel, drone by drone, hydrospanner by hydrospanner, slowly, carefully, methodically, without drama, without violence, without the need to be seen. And the removing was the thing. And the thing was enough. And the enough was everything. The cooperative received the confirmation 3 weeks later. The void sovereign was gone. Not destroyed. Not sunk. Not scuttled. Removed. Dismantled. Taken apart and dispersed. The hull plating was recycled. The weapons systems were deactivated. The engines were decommissioned. The stealth coding was analyzed and archived. The ship was no longer a ship. The ship was a collection of parts. The ship was a memory. The ship was a story. The ship was the thing that had been. And the thing that had been was no longer. And the no longer was the thing. And the thing was enough. And the enough was everything. The cooperative issued a statement. The statement acknowledged the resolution. The statement credited the Counterphantom Task Force. The statement credited Cedar Ridge. The statement credited Yuki Tanaka. The statement credited Ruth Okafor. The statement credited the 12 maintenance drones. The statement credited the hydrospanners. The statement credited the patients. The statement credited the absence. The statement credited the thing that had been done by looking for where the ship was not. Yuki read the statement. She read it in her office. She read it at her desk. She read it in the quiet. She read it in the unallocated. She read it in the space where no one was watching. She read it and she nodded. Once. Small. Quiet. The nod of a person who had found the thing by looking for the not thing. The nod of a person who had mapped the absence. The nod of a person who had understood the shadow. The nod of a person who had learned the principle on a fishing boat at 7 years old, and had carried it through 24 years of being unallocated, and had applied it to the thing that could not be seen and had found it. And the finding was the thing. And the thing was enough. And the enough was everything. She set the statement down. She looked out the window. She looked at the stars. She looked at the space between the stars. She looked at the absence. She looked at the negative space. She looked at the places where things were not. She looked at the shadows. She looked at the shapes that were defined by what surrounded them. She looked at the fish that were found by watching the water. She looked at the channels that were found by listening to the silence. She looked at the paths that were found by watching the waves that did not break. And she smiled. Small. Quiet. The smile of a person who understood the principle. Who carried the principle. Who lived the principle. Who had found the biggest, most invisible, most undetectable thing in the galaxy by looking for where it wasn't. By mapping the absence. By reading the negative space. By understanding that the thing you cannot see is defined by the space it displaces. By understanding that the invisible is not absent. The invisible is present. The invisible is the shape of the not there. The invisible is the shadow. The invisible is the absence. And the absence is the thing. And the thing is enough. And the enough is everything. And the everything was quiet. And the quiet was full. And the full was the absence. And the absence was the presence. And the presence was the ship. And the ship was gone. And the gone was the thing. And the thing was enough. And the enough was everything. The end.